Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review. And in this video I'm going to review Kuoleman Kirjo by Horna. This is the brand new album of the highly praised and really well known Finnish black metal band Horna that have been making albums from like the late 90s, and they have done multiple albums and so many different splits since then. Their overall discography might be hit or miss in some spots, but overall I think that they have a pretty good discography, with some of the albums in their catalog definitely being some of the best stuff I've heard in black metal. So Kuoleman Kirjo is the fifth album they make in W.T.C Productions, which is a label where I've found some pretty good black metal stuff. And some of the previous things they've done in this label have been sort of okay for the most part. Now I don't really find that some of the newer stuff from Horna really show their biggest strengths, just having that much of a raw and relentless sound, which is not something that I'm complaining since the ending results are still pretty good, and it's pretty understandable to see the band just taking a few risks and just experimenting with a few different sounds of black metal. But for the most part the formula is pretty much the same. You do know what to expect with every single new Horna release. So I didn't necessarily got into this album having the highest expectations. I didn't really know what to expect. But after listening to Kuoleman Kirjo, I can say without a doubt, with no question, that this is the best black metal album I've heard all year. Without a doubt. And thinking back of this year, I realized that I didn't really find that many significant black metal albums. At least in my opinion, I didn't really find many releases that I thought they were really that impressive. Some of them I was definitely expecting them and I got slightly disappointed by them, but now all of this has completely changed since Horna definitely released one of their greatest albums they have in their entire catalog, because this release in particular gives me so many vibes of my personal favorite album from Horna, which is their well-known magnum opus called Elävänä. I cannot pronounce it. You know this album. It's their most significant work and it's one of my personal favorites in black metal. And I love how this brand new album feels like a sequel of their most highly praised project. And that makes it the second greatest album I've heard from Horna so far, because I haven't listened to their entire catalog. But from what I've heard, I'm just so amazed by pretty much everything about this album. From its really raw and nasty production, this thing just sounds so heavy, so primitive. The musicianship and the production over here is just top notch, which is something that I pretty much get from everything Horna do. When it comes to performances, Horna still got it. After all of those years, it's actually insane. But what's really great about this album in particular is the riffs, the overall structure, with so many of the tracks just feeling so great in so many different occasions. Each transition over here feels so on point. We get some of the greatest riffs I've ever heard from like any Horna album. It's like so melodic, but it's also like so intense. Like the blast beats over here are absolutely relentless. It's just non-stop insanity, and we're talking about a quite long album that is 13 tracks and goes for 67 minutes. That's not a short album, and there is not a single occasion where it would give you a breath of fresh air. This is relentless. It never gives you a break. This is pure, relentless, raw black metal, and I absolutely love it. This is without a doubt one of the greatest things I've heard in black metal in like recent memory. I absolutely love this direction from Horna. It made for one of my all-time favorite black metal albums when it comes to Elävänä, and I think that they make an amazing job with this one because the overall sound, the melodies, the ideas, the structures over here, everything feels so on point. It's absolutely amazing. Now, it's not like this album doesn't have its faults. I don't think like every single track over here is that amazing, and with all of the tracks it's more of like how much I enjoy the riffs and how memorable they manage to become with their ideas and the overall pacing and the structure. And fortunately there are multiple occasions where this album really stands out. However, when it comes to the ideas by themselves, almost every single track sounds kind of the same. With each one of the 13 tracks, it's not like you're getting a new sound or like further development, they go for pretty much the same, and it's more of like a matter of how much the riffs manage to captivate you. And melodically this album for the most part is spectacular with some great riffs, but you know, with Horna albums it's not like you're expecting something that much different. I think that it's actually one of the greatest characteristics with Horna, how they manage to like stick with the sound and just manage to create some really well structured ideas. Now, when it comes to some standouts in the track listing, when I first heard of the track Satana Via, the introduction of this album, I thought that this was an amazing introduction. And don't get me wrong, I still think that it's an amazing introduction. Like when I first heard of this track, I was actually like, oh my god, here we go, this is the sound I want from Horna. But after listening to it with the rest of the context of this album, I don't really find it to be one of the strongest tracks moving forward. And one of the tracks that I was slightly indifferent at first was the track Uneton, the third one, but now it has definitely become one of my favorite moments. The riffs at the beginning of this thing are superb, and there's like a great streak from like tracks 2 to 5. Like 4 tracks in a row we get some really pure raw black metal stuff that are absolutely insane, with some fantastic riffs and actually some of the greatest performances I've heard from Horna in a long time. Even vocal, I think that this is one of their most standout projects. Elegia, for example, has some vocal passages that I absolutely love. They're just so furious. And there are also some other occasions where I feel that the vocals in particular just have a really strong role, which is not something that I would basically say for lots of other Horna releases. Now, it's not like this album makes something different, but I like that this doesn't try to make something different, as I think that in some of the occasions where Horna have experimented with some different stuff, it hasn't always worked that amazingly. But over here they have their signature sound, the one that made some of their first releases so special. Even if Horna were never making something original, they were just one of a kind for how greatly consistent albums they would have, with just amazing riffs and amazing structures, and overall some great musicianship. But I would also say that this album saves some of the greatest moments at the second half, with tracks like Rakas, for example. This track, in my opinion, definitely has some of the greatest riffs Horna have ever written. Like, this track is just so amazing in its writing and its whole production and sound. Structurally, for its 6-minute runtime, this track is just so on point. But in my opinion, the greatest moment out of this album has to be the track Mustat Vuodet. This track gives me like so much Elävänä vibe. It's actually insane. There was not a single moment out of this track in particular that was not mind-blowing. The overall structure, the way each one of the riffs would transition was just excellent, and I also think that this track has some of the greatest vocal performances out of this whole project, and it's also definitely one of the most unique moments in terms of structure. This track in some occasions actually attempts something a bit different, and it works perfectly. Now, I think that the length of this album does hurt it after a point, because this album is definitely long. We're talking about 13 tracks and over an hour of material. So after a while, some of the ideas may sound a bit samey, and there is a point where we don't see that much of an artistic progression, which I would say happens with the final 3 tracks. In my opinion, it could have been much better if those 3 tracks were not in this album. For example, the track Pyhä Kuolema is a really short one, and in its short runtime it doesn't really do that much. Not only does it have some of the weakest riffs, but it ends really fast without justifying its length. Vuodet was a pretty decent track, but then we have the final moment, which is the track Minut, Vastaan. And this track attempts something slightly different, with some slower passages and some vocals that are like a mix of clean and sort of spiritual in a sense. We get some of those moments actually with some other tracks in this album. Like for example, I think it happens on tracks 4 and 6 in some occasions. The thing though is that it's the approach that I don't feel that really works with the sound of Horna in some occasions. And even if Minut, Vastaan has some pretty nice riffs and some nice directions with the sound, it's the approach that sort of hurts this track a little bit for me. But even with like those really few shortcomings, overall we have to do with a spectacular black metal album over here. I am so glad I gave this release a listen. I didn't know what to expect, but this is definitely more than I expected. This right here is Horna's return to form, back in their glorious days, creating for me at least the greatest black metal album I've heard in 2020, without a doubt. I'm going to give Kuoleman Kirjo an 8 out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.